the reason that this is such an important conversation to have now is because the reality is that we're never comfortable having these conversations at any time. And what happens is this lends itself to a discussion because it's on the minds of the children. Just imagine, think of it in any other way. When would you rather have a discussion? Your child's not interested in math, and suddenly you're applying for a mortgage, and you got all these papers on the table, and he or she says, "Hey, what's that all about?" And you say, "Well, I'm thinking about doing a 30-year or a 20-year," and all of a sudden you have a real math conversation. If you called that child over and said, "Come on, let's talk about math," were you kidding?
Right.
So all of a sudden, this situation, again, as you said at the beginning, it is not about this particular accusation. I don't know anything, just as you don't. We don't know anything other than what we read in the papers. And he's entitled to his, presumption of innocence and his day in court. But it's out there in the news. He is a very public figure, a very revered figure. Like you said, he's, certainly, Yehuda Meshi-Zahav just won the Israel Prize, which I understand he returned.
Right.
But it's a teachable moment. And so I encourage parents to move away from the I don't know to say, well, there are accusations against a very prominent person, this and this person. They might know, they don't know. If they don't know, then the name might not be important either. But then you come up with mentioning that he was accused of abuse, and abuse is when someone's space is invaded, and then you can have a real discussion about boundaries in an age-appropriate way. And I'll go through, what those major points are. We have a free 9-minute video that's available in English. We have one in Hebrew subtitles that I really encourage everyone to watch. I'll give you the Cliff Notes here, the shorter version.
Please do.
But the real discussion is, number one, that it happens. Number two, it could happen to anybody, could be an abuser, anyone, including public figures, including people that we revere, including people who have a rabbi in front of their name, including elected officials that we look up to, or athletes. It doesn't make a difference. This is not only something like a sin. It's a sickness, and people are doing evil things. And that's really the message, because forensically, when we look back on many of the situations where people get caught after abusing dozens or even hundreds of people, you say, well, how do they get away with it for so long? A lot of it has to do with the fact that we judge by what we see. And the piece I put in Times of Israel on Friday, I wrote primarily about the halo effect. A halo effect is that the original research was done in the Army. They discovered that handsome soldiers and good-looking soldiers got better grades, not only on things that were like, fungible, like leadership, but even in things that had data.
Should be objective, right?
And it goes with grading tests. If you grade the professional tests, they don't even do them. They do all number ones first and all number twos, and they cover the name, because if you had a star student in your class and they write something that doesn't seem to be 100%, you'll read it into their words because they know everything. And when we have someone, I'm sorry?
I'm disagreeing, right? Since he knows everything, he could not have gotten this wrong. It must be he must have made a mistake. He clearly knows the answer.
And here's where the rubber meets the road, Scott. I tell folks, imagine you have a Bal Kriya in shul, the one who reads from the Torah, commonly known as Bal Koreh, right? So if someone's reading in the shul for 35 years, never ever made a mistake, and he makes a bad one, I could almost guarantee you, Yankee won't correct him. Right. I don't know about Reb Scott, but most people would be very, very...
I'm a tough guy, but you're right.
What?
I'm a tough guy, but you're right.
No, I know you got it. No, but you're reluctant to say anything. You'll say, well, but
I must be wrong. I must have made a mistake.
I must have made a mistake. The glasses aren't working. Or maybe his grandfather has a different Masorah.
Right, exactly.
Tradition for doing things. You're not going to have the courage to get up there. And that's what happens when people... again, I'm not speaking about this case, but you find people in positions of power who are widely respected, get so much more latitude when they break down the rules of yichud. And that's another great discussion to have with children. The laws of yichud, that we're not supposed to seclude ourselves with people of the opposite gender. And but you say, but he is such a distinguished person, can't be. No, it means for me, it means for you, it means for everybody. So these are the messages to kind of break that halo effect. And it's great that you can explain to the children. You know, sometimes people who are very prominent and we're horrified when we hear the news. A lot of it happens because we often assume that they're beyond doing a horrible thing like this.
Then, Rabbi Horowitz, let me ask you something just about that particular point. When I talked about this talk that we're going to have with my wife, Eliza, she asked me, and I'm passing on the question too, because I don't have an answer. How do you balance giving healthy fear with making kids terrified? Like, you don't want the kids to be afraid to go out the front door because everybody's a potential abuser. On the other hand, it's good to sort of say everyone could be an abuser. How do you make sure an 11-year-old, for example, has the right kind of fear, not the wrong kind of overwhelming fear?
So, you know, our Chachamim beat you to it. The kabdeyu v'chashteyu, that's what it means, right? Kabdeyu, give kavod, v'chashteyu, but be suspicious. That's as complicated and as simple as that. Mm-hmm. You tell them, look, of course you should respect people who are worthy of respect. You give them the benefit of the doubt as globally, and we should treat them with respect. But if you see a person of respect comes and tells you something that wouldn't be okay with someone else, then it's not okay for he or she. We keep speaking about, you know, males, but, you know, women abuse also. So I mean, the rules apply across the board, and it's such an important lesson to get across. You know, we was our oldest grandchild became bar mitzvah a few months ago. Mr. Shemba, you guys, and when I first started working in this space, like it was shortly after he was born, and that's when we published our first book, our child safety book. And one of the things that I told him when I would horseplay with grandkids like everybody else, I would always say, if Zaidi does something that you don't like, please tell me to stop. I always tell it to all the grandchildren, male and female. I always say, you know, if anything I do that makes you uncomfortable, and they've done it.
They have.
And I'm sorry?
And they have, you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. The first time it ever happened to me, I remember it was on Shavuos, and before we went to shul, I sat down and putting to sleep. I read the Three Little Pigs story, and I was huffing and puff with my own children. I was blah, and I blah, and he taps me on the hand. He couldn't have been more than 3, maybe even younger, and he said, "Zaidi, please don't blow on me. I don't like it." And I said, "Thank you." And it was, first of all, it was a good lesson for me, but this stuff works. This child safety stuff really works.
You know, Rabbi Horowitz, can I tell a story from my own experience?
Please, by all means, please.
I don't mean to get too personal, but I'll just say, for example, with my daughter, there was a case where, you know, again, Abba, daughter, horsing around, playing around, and she would sometimes say, "Oh, no, don't do that." And I had to teach her that, and then I would stop, and she goes, no, I'm just kidding. I want you to do it. When I say no, I mean yes. And I had to teach her, and I'm still working on it. No, I have to explain to you, when you say no, I'm going to assume you mean no. That's right. Because you can't have ambiguity when it comes to no. When you tell me not to do something, I'm going to stop doing it.
Absolutely.
Even if that's not what you really mean, because you have to understand the word no means no.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what you said, what you mentioned with your wife about the question about the anxiety. Dr. David Pelkowitz was kind enough to mentor me through all my tremendous learning curve in this space, and who went over every word and every image and everyone in the books for us. He was amazing. And one of the things that he was, when we were designing the book, the child safety book, we made sure that none of those images were frightening. And Dr. Pelkowitz quoted research that shows that if parents frighten children, that the fear crowds their brain, and it doesn't allow them to absorb the information. And I extrapolated from that when I do my child safety classes, I never start with a scary story, even though
Uh-huh.
it would get their attention. If you watch me, I got the cardigan sweater. I said, relentless. I'll give you the tools. Always, I always start like this. Look, I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do this on your own. It's eminently doable. This stuff works. Research shows that one conversation makes children six to seven times more likely to exhibit defensive behavior with if you do follow up on that. So, to give them the tools. So we shouldn't frighten the children, just like I shouldn't frighten parents when I talk to them. So not only is it you don't want to frighten them, it doesn't work. It works less. Dr. Pelkowitz said you should, if 1 to 10, 10 is the most elevated level of concern. He said like 2, 3, 4 is about right.
Mm-hmm.
Enough that it's important, but not enough to frighten them, and that these rules should become part of their lives. The four basic rules of child safety while you're speaking to your children: no secrets from parents. That children are never allowed to be told by anyone, a school principal, a teacher, a relative. This is between us. That's absolutely out of bounds, and it's a tremendous red flag because that's one of the things abusers do. Um, my body belongs to me. The notion of ownership of personal space, and just to teach the children that just like they have things in their room and their house that belong to them, that their body is theirs, and they have ownership and have the right to tell someone else that you can't do what you want, with my body if I don't like it. And there again, research shows that just giving children their own drawer at home,
Mm-hmm.
or telling the kids to knock when they go into each other's rooms, makes the children more attuned to invasions of their personal space.
Interesting.
Okay, good touching, bad touching. Some touching is okay, some touching is not okay. Spot covered by a bathing suit. Limit the exceptions when you tell it to children. Don't say no one should touch you in a private space except people in our family, because unfortunately, abusers, if
Right.
the research shows that it's usually that inner circle, close friends or family. So keep it very tight. The only ones who can touch you in a private space is, Abba and Ima when we're bathing you, Sapta when we're over for a visit, or doctor when we're in the room. Very, very narrow window of people that are exceptions to that rule. And you say, when you'll get older, you'll be able to do all this yourself. And then the fourth rule is no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. If you're feeling uncomfortable for any reason, you have a right to get out of there, and we will support that right, because very often that the fourth one is the most difficult to teach, and it's perhaps the most important, because the kids, usually long before the abuse takes place, the children are being groomed for that abuse, and they start having this ucky feeling. And whether it's physical touch that's not abuse, or someone touches them on their shoulder, kids don't have the language to say, well, oh, it wasn't a private spot. What? Oh, okay. No, but that's not what it was. But I felt uncomfortable. Why? They might not be able to tell you that the hand was lingering too long, or they
Uh-huh.
were looked at in a certain way. So you just teach them, if you feel uncomfortable, get out. We will support you. Those are the four basic rules. There's a 9-minute video, like I said. We'll both post links to it
Yes.
afterwards, to be able to get the. But this is the message. The message, folks, is that if your children are talking about it, um, again, you can make a decision as parents whether you want to tell them about it or not. But certainly, if the children are talking about it, is a great time to have these conversations that you should have with them. And especially the teenagers often look at these rules as the child safety is something for little kids. But boys and girls, perhaps especially girls, once they get older, it's a different type of conversation, but it's the same concept about their personal space, and about body awareness, and that they should understand all of these things.
It's a very difficult conversation to have, but now that we have the opportunity, sad as it is to have that opportunity, it would be a shame to waste it. So I absolutely appreciate your telling us that. I have one question to ask you before we sign off, which is sort of a
Sure.
side point, but I'm just wondering, it's not really about this particular topic, but it's about this larger topic we're talking about, when heroes fall, and how we tell our children about that. And even telling children, telling ourselves, at this point, as sometimes I feel, okay, what shoe is going to drop next. You're just waiting for every single hero we have to be knocked off the pedestal. We tell people that certain people are worthy of respect. We tell ourselves that certain people are so important. And then when heroes fall, it can be very disheartening, both for us and for our children. What do we tell ourselves? What do we tell our children when a hero falls?
And Rev Scott, that's that's also part of living life. Part of living life is realizing that the rules apply to everyone across the board, and that ultimately at the end of the day everyone is a human being, and you don't know what's going on in that person's mind, and that person may have been, I'm certainly not excusing any type of abuse, but you don't know what this person went through as a child. God forbid the person, an abuser, could have suffered trauma. That doesn't excuse it, and we treat them the same. But you never know what's going on in someone else's mind, and you never know what type of illness people has. Just like we understand that people could have a disease and you won't notice it. People could be very, very sick, and you don't know it. So it is a disheartening conversation. None of us want to give up all the naivete of our youth, right?
Of course
and
not.
I'm sorry.
Certainly not. I'm agreeing.
And it's a painful thing for us. I remember Dr. Mel Levine was somebody that I learned a lot from. He was for those who don't know, he was a rock star in America on learning disabilities and treating all children equally. 40 years ago, he was talking about this. 50 years ago, I went to seminars of his, and allegations came out a number of years ago. Ultimately, he shot himself. He killed himself just very shortly after they came out. And I was devastated. But that's the way it is. It's a healthy part, I guess, to know that not everybody is perfect. There's just no other way to do it. So, we have to internalize this ourselves, and it's a hard pill imagine how difficult it is for children if you and I are having a hard time with this.
Oh, of course. It's almost a side point. It's extraordinarily silly, but there's something which was, it touched a very deep, raw nerve in myself. I don't know if you do tooth fairy with your children. For us, when our kids lose a tooth, we do the tooth fairy. It's, and of course, later on, they know very, very well who it is. They still think it's their mother, but it's not. But I remember one time I had a little kid, one of my daughters, and she lost a tooth, and we tell me to put a note underneath the tooth fairy. I forgot.
Oh, you forgot to drop it off.
I forgot to drop it off.
She said the tooth fairy forgot.
And she said she didn't come. And to me, that moment, even though it's obviously silly, it doesn't matter, but ultimately that loss of naivete at that moment, to something didn't happen the way you expect for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever she was at the time. That moment was a raw nerve for me. And I think about that, obviously, for real people.
And I did
they don't live up to our expectations. It's right? Very, very difficult.
I did a talk with the police chief in Tenafly, New Jersey. I just checked Chabad.org had it, but for some reason it's offline. I'll post it if I can get it back from them. I spoke and then he spoke. He was fantastic. And one of the things he said, I'll never forget it. It made such an impression on me. He said, I wrote it in the Times of Israel piece. He said, when you see something going on, he said, it, not whom.
What do you mean?
Judge the action. Mm-hmm. If you see a suspicious act, in other words, what we do, Reb Scott, is we make a little hybrid there. We take the information, like with the Bakriya in Shul. Mm-hmm. Is he reading the Torah properly? And what do we know about his past? And we take these two things and we mix them up and we come up with a verdict.
Right.
The example that I gave.
It's the halo effect all over again.
That's the halo effect, right? So you make these judgments based on both of these things. Example I gave was somebody taking money out of a charity box in Shul. You come to Shul in the morning, you're the second one in Shul. First person in Shul is standing at the bima, taking money out of the pushka, out of the charity box. So do you call the cops or not? It depends. If
Right.
it's someone who looks like you, if it's someone who's an honorable person, you say, well, he had a larger bill, he put it in there, he's taking change. If it's someone suspicious looking, you call the cops. So the it was exactly the same. The whom made you decide what to do. And he said, you just imagine, I found this to be an effective exercise rather than saying, well, just ignore it. No, just make believe that the same action was done by someone suspicious looking. If someone suspicious looking told you, I want you to come, I'll take you out for a drive at 10:30 at night, or don't tell this to your parents. If it was somebody frightening, you would get scared, but it's he or she. That's really the most important message. So parents out there, I really wish you mazel and bracha. Um, Please take advantage of the video. We also have books. We have child safety books that are in Israel for the Dati Leumi community and for the Haredi community. It's Masha Batuach Batuach. Actually bought, this is the Masha Batuach Batuach is the Haredi version, and Levetach is the Dati Leumi version. They're in Yefeinov stores and Feldheim stores all across the country. For bulk orders, you can go to contact Stuart Schnee. It's STU at stuartschnee.com. But really, parents, there are so many great tools out there. Educate yourselves, then educate the children. Try not to be too frightened yourself, and certainly don't frighten the kids when you talk to them. I wish you all mazel and bracha, and I hope that we use this very uncomfortable situation for a genuine learning opportunity.
I mean, thank you very much, Rabbi Horowitz, for talking to all of us today.